Hello my dear friends, in this video we have no journey somewhere, but today I'd like to express my thoughts about can we repeat 1991 in Russian history again, when 15 former Soviet republics got the freedom. I have visited the various amount of Russian regions for the last 7 years of my active traveling around Russia, and for example for this year I have visited 5 out of 6 national republics in Volga region. That's why I think my thoughts can be relevant and useful in this issue. First of all, you should realize how Russia is different. That's why you should know the theory of 4 different Russias. Yes, literally there are 4 different Russias located inside Russia. And this model developed by PhD of Geography Science and Professor of Moscow State University by Natalya Zubarevich. And this is insanely interesting person and a teacher who I would love to learn from even. I'm really thankful to the universe that such mentors existing in our world. Her theory explains center-periphery model of space development that has existed in economic geography since 1970s. In socio-economic terms, Russia is explained as the area divided into relatively developed cities and backward province. And I'm not a column to open you this fact, but it's so similar working even for in other countries. The borders of these 4 Russias are conditional, and it's impossible to clearly determine where it passes between regions and between cities. Sometimes even 2 different Russias can be in the same city. But this model well describes how Russia is different and how our society is diverse as a whole. The first Russia unites Moscow and million-plus cities, where 21% of Russia's population lives. Several millionaire cities of the country are predominantly a post-industrial society. The middle class of Russia is concentrated in them. The main internal migration is directed to these cities. Millionaires draw the population of their regions, Moscow the whole country. Another examples of these cities, for example, Novosibirsk. He collects people from the whole Siberia and Far East. It's so similar for Krasnoyarsk too, but it's less noticeable because Krasnoyarsk is halfly smaller than Novosibirsk by population. Yekaterinburg, he collects people from the whole Ural. Kazan, Samara and Nizhny Novgorod collect people from the whole Volga region, and I even nothing say about Moscow and St. Petersburg though. So in these cities concentrated the modernist part of Russian population, the real Russian middle class. Cities with population over 200,000 inhabitants, which is by the way 36% of entire country population, can be included to this category too. For example, Tomsk. Tomsk collects young people from the whole Siberia too, due to a huge number of different universities located in this city. And this so similar process is going in every regional capital of Russia because of capitals siphoning the modernist part of population from there backwards. And in general, the first Russia, it's this part of population where people have access to modern jobs, market, culture and internet technologies. But not every Russian millionaire city collects people successfully. There are a group of industrial cities where population harshly differs from the cities with the same number. For example, Omsk, Chelyabinsk, Perm, Voronezh, Volgograd and etc. These cities less attract modern population from another regions, but still collect youth from the province. And they are more like second Russia. This is industrial centers and monotowns. Monotowns cities which don't form any agglomeration. The population of these cities constituting 25% of entire Russian population, where people mainly employed in industry, were poorly educated, and according to Natalya Zubarevich, how she says, people continue lead the Soviet way of life. The true examples of second Russia are Cherepavets, whereas the main employer is Severstal, similar with Norilsk, whereas the main employer is Nornikel, Magnitogorsk with MMK, Bratsk with Rusal, and another industrial cities of Russia, Novokuznetsk, Kemerovo, and etc. The third Russia unites the Russian outback, small towns and villages, whereas 38% of the total population. In these settlements there is a reduction and fast aging of the population. The third Russia is through electorate of Vladimir Putin. This is a place where live lonely grandmother, which means the strong male hand which bring the order to the whole country. Their influence on our policy cannot be underestimated, because if you will see on the age-sex pyramid of Russia, you will observe that the post-war generation, those same babushkas, were as twice as many than generation of 90s, where I consider myself too. That's why I want to point you in this moment, because there is no any tensions between some minorities in Russia in this case. For example, there is no any minorities in Russia who actively support this war, and some minorities who don't. There is a tension between some generations in Russia, because old people support the war and young people disgrace it. And this situation is twice deadly for our country, because of, as it's implied, the youngest people must participate in the war, and this is exactly the generations of 90s and 2000s. It's those people who were modernist part of population, they just completed their studies, and they just started to make their economic contribution in the country. And finally, the last one, the fourth Russia. The fourth Russia combines the republics of North Caucasus and Southern Siberia, mainly Tuva and Altai. There is a high birth rate, so there are quite a lot of young people. These are the least developed regions of Russia, and in this moment you might think that all Russians are imperials, they live only at the expense of outlying republics, but the fact is that there is nothing extracted from these regions compared with, for example, regions of Western Siberia, where is the mining of gas and oil, which was supplied to Europe. That's why all these republics depend on the subsidies from federal center. By the way, the same thing was also in USSR. Despite that USSR had a various amount of negative features, I think USSR was not a colony in classic sense, because of every minority of Soviet Union had opportunity to go in Moscow for the promotion or to go to far north regions for good earnings. Soviet economical system was a such interesting, ineffective and insane system, where better lived people maybe in Moscow as a capital, and those people who moved in far north regions for permanent life, they only them lived better in USSR. That's why I often like the story from those people who lived in such cities like Vorkuta, Norilsk or Magadan. They like to tell the similar story. What a glorious life was in USSR. I had an opportunity to go for a beer and for a weekend in Moscow, while their friends or their relatives stand in a line in some Tarzhok just for a toilet paper. But if we talk about situation right now, some Russian republics live even better than indigenously Russian regions. For example, Vyatka region and Tatarstan. Better than in Tatarstan, people live only in Moscow, St. Petersburg, some oil gas mining regions in Western Siberia, and that's all. That's why I don't see any reasons what can lead to separatism in Volga republics. Because of, if you're gonna separate from Russia, anyway you will be surrounded by Russia. Because of no one Volga republic have international border. And finally, which will be enclave. And the second reason, because of every Volga minority spread alongside Russia. The brightest example are Tatars. Tatars are 5 millions in Russia, and only 2 millions of them live in Tatarstan particularly. And other Volga minorities have no such wide distribution in Russia as Tatars. Their resettlement is largely concentrated in neighboring republics from the Volga to the Urals. And in general, these nations live with Russian states since 1552. During this time, a huge number of cultural TS have been formed, and in particular, many families where one of the parents is Chuvash and other is Russian, for example. Therefore, I don't believe that separatism is possible here at all. What about Siberian republics? There are 5 different republics in Siberia: Tuva, Khakassia, Altai, Buryatia and Yakutia, and a several number of autonomous regions with a small population of local nomads. So, for my short life, I have visited 3 out of 5 Siberian republics. I have visited Khakassia in 2016 when I was living in Tomsk. I have visited in COVID year Altai Republic, and previous year I have visited Buryatia. And by the way, the video about traveling in Buryatia, traveling in the northern part of a vehicle, I live here, Actually, it's not the best one video on my channel, but if you want more interesting videos like this or videos about traveling in Russia or somewhere around, don't forget to like this video, subscribe this channel, and leave some interesting impressions and your objections in the comments below. Thank you. All these regions were annexed to Russia 300-400 years ago, and for such a long time Russia gained a lot of cultural ties between local nomads. For example, every minority in Siberia properly know Russian. They learn Russian from the school time like it do people in European part of Russia. But the real problem of such regions, it's not a cultural gains. The real problem of such regions was titular nation is not in majority frequently in those regions. For example, let I tell you some information about population of capitals of those republics. For example, Ulan-Ude, the capital of Buryatia, here is living 61% of Russians and 32% of Buryats. Another example, Yakutsk. Here is living 48% of Yakuts and 37% of Russians. Abakan, the capital of Khakassia. Here is living 80% of Russians and only 12% of Khakassia itself. Here is allocated Tuva because of Tuva. This is the youngest region of Russia. Tuva joined Russia less than 80 years ago, and here is living 80% of Tuvans and only 16% of Russians. What I know about Tuva, it is the most dangerous and the most depressing one region of Russia, because of there is no any industry, there is no university, there is no any resorts where you can go for tourism. So in general there is nothing happens there. I know only there are walking bears and somewhere there walking Shoigu with Putin, and that's only what's happening there. But in Siberia it's existing the serious narrative about what Siberia and Ural fits Moscow. And I think it's even the normal narrative for another countries of the world when countryside fits the capital. But under Putin in Russia it's getting more noticeable what all proceeds from the sale of resources settle in Moscow. And those regions where was mined those resources only get pennies, because there is a fake federalism in Russia right now. Russia now it's unitary states like Czech Republic, and I don't trust in projects of Far East Republic or Ural Republic or, oh my gosh, United States of Siberia. I don't trust at all in these projects, because those people who live in such territories, they have friends, they have relatives in European part of Russia. For example, on my family, as far as I know, we have some relatives in Ukrainian Crimea. My ancestors are from Tatarstan, Mordovia and Bashkortostan. I was born in Siberian Tomsk. All my childhood I was going in Irkutsk to my Buryat relatives. We also have some relatives in Khabarovsk, Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, Vladivostok. And I'm not a unique one person. We are not unique one family in Russia. There are a lot of families like our family who have a lot of relatives around Russia in every corner of Russia. What about North Caucasus republics? So I was in North Caucasus only once, and it was a long time ago in 2015, but I can say with confidence that all Caucasus minorities are the least integrated in Russian society, because they live with Russian state only 200 years in average. But also I can say with confidence that all Caucasus minorities, North Caucasus exactly, they depend on Moscow economically. As far as I know, the youngest region which live with Russian state, this is Chechnya or Ichkeria. They historically wanted to separate from Russia, and I think Chechnya it's a real candidate where can be separatism in Russia. But I noticed too this point that Chechnya also depend on Moscow economically. I'm sure Russia will live another tough economic period again in next few years, and right at this moment some regions can start separate from Russia, and more exactly maybe some regional kings can start separate from Russia in order to put the Hitler on the cash flow and redistribute by own, and also all of it cannot affect on well-being of development of democracy in Russia, and because it settle a certain instability in Russia which lower the probability of installation of real democracy in Russia and installation of a real federal system. I would like Russia be the real federal state where every region can have own tax system, own laws, and just to make Russia more open to the world, when people from another countries can visit Russia calmly and explore the wonderful country of Russia. Thank you friends for watching this video. You can support me by buying me a coffee, because this is the easiest way for me to withdraw money from there, and also dive in these travel videos from Russia just to discover it, and peace to everyone.